Hello, everyone. It is Unfound live on Facebook. How's everybody doing? Today is November 7th, 2018. We've had some beautiful days here in Madeira Beach, Florida. I hope everybody who is out there is having some good weather. I know the north is, at least in the United States, is getting cold. I frankly am glad I'm not there. Kelly and Holly and Cherie, what's going on, Cherie? Christy, got an interesting program for you tonight. We're going to be releasing some new, I guess me being that I'm doing the talking, going to be releasing some new things, new details, some changes that are coming up with Unfound. And I think you'll be very interested. All of you are going to get to hear it first. And then I'll be mentioning some of it on Friday, of course, for those people who don't watch this live show. And then this will also be even in more detail in the next newsletter, which should be coming out about a week from now. What's going on? Kimmy, not Kimberly, Kimmy. I love it. Kimmy, love it. Michael and Ann and Cheryl and Melissa, Pamela, what's going on? Janet, glad you could make it. Maureen, Pamela, Michelle. So glad the cold weather is here. It may be there, but it's not here, Holly, although it does get a little chilly here. It does a little bit. Cindy, Lisa, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And there's Joyce. Hey, y'all, Joyce says. Love to see that. That's cool. You know we don't do politics on Unfound, but being that I follow many of you in my private feed, I do know the political leanings of at least some of my listeners, and some of you are like way over here, and some of you are like way over here, and I think all groups maybe had something a little to be happy about last night, and then some groups had some things not so happy to be they had reasons to be not so happy about what happened yesterday. But I'm glad that we can all come together no matter our political affiliations and agree on missing persons cases and how they need to be solved. All right. So we don't do divisive things here. I don't allow any political talk in the discussion group at all, because that only serves to make people go off into groups. I think politics is important. I think political ideas are important, but that's not what we do here. I'm glad that everybody, despite what your political affiliation, everybody gets along when it comes to missing persons cases, and that's what's most important to me. Everybody's tuning in here. Thank you, Carrie and Kelly, KH Kelly. Michael says, Ed, you're not sure I am? I was married to Brandy Wells. Michael, I didn't know that. Okay, well, thank you for tuning in. I think that you and my assistant, Emily, I guess have had some talks, right? I think I'm right about that. Well, Michael, thank you for tuning in. You should know that Emily and I talk about Brandy probably at least once a month about, the case and things. So thank you for tuning in. Diane, what's going on? Kelly says she hasn't turned off her AC in Virginia yet. I love it, Kelly. I like to keep my place cold as well. And Christina and everybody, thank you. Shuri is saying agreed, I think, when it comes to the politics. And Carrie and Shanna and everybody, thank you for all tuning in. Thank you for making me an Unfound a part of your Wednesday. So we had the election yesterday, and once again, my assessment is everybody had, I think, at least one thing to be happy about yesterday. Not everybody went away sad, I don't think. It's funny, maybe just a little off the topic. I posted a picture from about 10 years ago in my on my private feed on Facebook, and I know some of you are friends with me on there. You saw me with longer hair. And it seems like yesterday that I had hair like that. Of course, I had long hair just a couple years ago, and I got it all taken off before I went to see my mother, I think in 2017, because she hates long hair. Um, but I was told by my business person, who I guess I call her my business manager, that I need to open up a little bit more about some of these things. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I maybe tend to be a little too much of the strong silent type when it comes to what goes on outside of Unfound. But yes, I did used to have long hair. I had long hair when I started Unfound, and then it got chopped off last year, like July of 2017. But before that, I had longer hair from about 2005. I'm going to say into 2009 somewhere. And then I had short hair, and then I went back to long hair. So there you go. I'm not sure if all of you saw that or not, but it seems like yesterday. I remember that picture being taken. It was my sister's in Ohio, and it seems like yesterday. It was just weird that picture came up. 27 into South Dakota, Pamela is saying. Michelle says, thank you, Ed, for not forgetting about our Brandy. Michelle, you're welcome. I don't think I forget about any of the cases that I've covered. In fact, I was just telling somebody before I got on here, every day when I'm going through my computer to get pictures to post, and if you follow the Unfound page, how I post pictures of prior cases and links to them on Podomatic, I look at the pictures of every case, there's missing people every day. 7 days a week, 365 days a year, 366 days on leap years. I see their pictures every day, and I think about them every day. Nicole, what's going on? Janet says, love the long hair. Thank you. Nicole, thank you. Laura says, hey, Ed, happy Wednesday. Happy Wednesday to you, Laura. I do want to talk. Okay, so we talked about my hair. I thought you guys might enjoyed seeing that. I have to say that my long hair looked better back in 2008 and 2009 than when I grew it out in like 2015, 2016. I mean, I still, as you can see, I have plenty of hair, but just didn't go as well. I have to admit that. But some of you, to move on to something that happened in the Unfound podcast discussion group a few days ago, there was a psychic who popped up. And my attitude towards psychics. And how this all went down, if you missed it, is I posted a story about allegedly how these psychics and ghost hunters discovered a buried body of a missing person in a house. And my feelings on that. It turns out that after I posted it, one of the members there could tell a much more complete story of how the body was found. And it was obvious to me very quickly that the psychics and the ghost hunter were taking credit for something that was suspected by non-psychics and non-ghost hunters for a long time. And they finally regular people finally acted upon it, and they found a body which they believed to be this missing person who lived in that house. And I, of course, in posting that, and and anybody that's been listening to the program for 2 years knows that we don't talk about psychics on Unfound. They are never mentioned, okay, unless the guest somehow mentions it, but they're not really a topic. And I said something, I posted something along with that. Well, there was a psychic in the group. And I'm not going to mention her name. The posts are all still there if you want to go read what happened. And she went on this thing, are you telling me that you don't believe in psychics and all this stuff? And I just simply asked her, I gave her an explanation, and then I asked her something to the effect of, if you saw, have you ever solved a missing persons case? And she quickly replied, yes. Okay. So I replied to her, tell us about it, meaning all the other members, there's 3,500 members in the discussion group now, tell us about that case. Well, within seconds, she took herself out of the group, and she blocked me and never responded. at all to this day. As I'm sitting here, 10 after 9 Eastern time in the United States, November 7th, 2018. She's not responded. Well, she can't respond now because she's not in the group anymore. I want you to know I did not kick her out. I did not do that. She left on her own. And Jerry says, Jerry, I feel the same way about you. I love you, Ed. Thank you. She never did respond. And see, this is the issue. And then I ended up posting something after when it was obvious she was not going to respond and she was out of the group. See, I don't want anybody to think that I am picking on psychics. I do that a lot on these live shows. I have to put the quotes up. I don't want anybody to ever think that I am picking on psychics. I treat psychics like I do everybody else in my life who is supposed to be good at something or a professional at something. I want to see a resume. You just don't take, if you go to buy a car, even those, car salesmen are known to be a little, they can exaggerate things once in a while, but you'd never buy a car without driving it. You'd never buy a car without, looking up what Consumer Reports or something have to say about it. When you're hiring somebody, you want to see their resume. What have they done? You want to be able to call some of their former bosses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's the same way with me for psychics. If a psychic can prove to me that they have solved a missing persons case or something, I will listen to them. The problem is that no psychics have ever done that. But they want us to just take their word for it that they have special powers. Well, I don't take anything for granted like that, and I'm sure no adult does. No adult does. For all of you parents out there, if you're going to hire a babysitter, you get references. You don't just take that 17-year-old's word that he or she is good at taking care of little kids, right? But the problem is that psychics, I think, feel like we're just supposed to take them for granted. And anytime you try to engage them in discussion, I've seen it elsewhere too. I've seen it on Web Sleuths, when I used to go there a lot more, and other places. When you try to engage them in conversation about their powers and what they've done, you can't have a constructive conversation with them. And it was once again illustrated, however many days ago that was, in the group. One more reason that we don't talk about psychics on the program. I'm not saying that the topic of psychics don't come up in my private conversations with guests. It comes up many times. They, for the most part, feel about them the same way I do, is they don't trust them. They learn to not trust them, I should say. Although they may entertain them and may take their advice at the beginning, they quickly figure out, well, these people really don't know what they're talking about. And so when I talk to guests, I make sure they understand that I am not a believer in psychics. Once again, for the reasons I've stated. I think even in that exchange I had with that psychic, I stated that, everything I think I know about psychics, I learned from at least someone I think is more intelligent on the topic than I am, and that is Kelly Murphy, Jason Jolkowski's mother. She did a 6-hour course on psychics. Now, I know Project Jason doesn't exist now, and that's unfortunate. That sucks. But she had a 6-hour seminar that she would show or have them give to families for free about how psychics are predators. And I even ended up posting some of those links in the group so everybody could see what I'm talking about. So if nobody wants to take my word for it, yeah, I haven't lost a child to a disappearance. Well, and no psychic has ever come to me, has never had any reason to come to me. Well, Kelly has, and she has dealt with psychics way back in the day. And that was what she decided. She felt so strongly about how they cannot help and they're predators and everything else that she created a 6-hour course on it. So there's that. I'm just wondering if some of you saw that exchange. In fact, if you haven't, if you're a member of the discussion group, you can go and see it. Hello, Andrea. What's going on? Good to see you tonight. Penny, what's going on? Cherie says, I believe the majority of us feel the same regarding psychics. Dan, what's up? Welcome tonight. Leslie. Michelle, good to see you tonight. And Jimmy, good to see Jimmy tonight. What's going on, Jimmy? Katrina. Yeah, Cherie says if they can solve one missing person's case, they why not solve all of them? I agree. I agree. Michelle says it's hopeful to believe in psychics, but it never leads anywhere, and it's just as heartbreaking. They are predictors. I'm going to maybe guess, Michelle, you meant to say predators, maybe? Okay. But, you know, I know that I haven't talked about that topic for a while. I think that I've conveyed that to most of the guests. I think I've talked to a few listeners in private about it, but I wanted to just get that on the record on this video, of course, that's being recorded, on why we don't talk about psychics, why I don't take them seriously, but it's not because I'm picking on them. Yes, my personal belief system of how the world works, I don't believe in psychics, okay? But if somebody comes to me with something, I'm willing to listen. My mind is open, okay? Especially when it comes to missing persons cases. I would not let my own personal beliefs about anything get in the way of solving a missing persons case. I would never do that. I would never do that. So if some psychic can say, well, back in 2006, I had this vision and they went down, anybody can do that. I'm willing to listen to them. Now, of course, once they tell me that, I'm going to try to find the family to see what they say. I'm going to go and try to contact the police department to see what they say. I'm going to check references. It's going to be trust but verify with me. But I will listen. I will listen. Emily, good to see you tonight. Jimmy says, finally got time to tune in. Thank you, Jimmy. Predator, Michelle said, okay, you did mean predators. New phone, Michelle. Well, good phone. What kind of phone did you get, Michelle? I personally have an LG V30, which is spectacular. That's the one I use to record all of the interviews I do for the program. And it does great audio. Most of the time, great audio. Does good video and everything. So I'd be interested to know, you know, I have an LG V30 that I've had since like May or something, and it's good. So I wanted to talk about the psychics for a little bit. And of course, all of you are turning in late. You can pick that up later. Peggy McGuire, let's talk about the poll from last week. Peggy's episode was very popular. A lot of downloads from it. I was happy to see that. In the end, you know, the poll, I made it kind of difficult. You know, it would have been too easy to ask, do you think that the father of her child did something to her? That would have been too easy a question. So I asked, what do you think is the main obstacle that is keeping him from being prosecuted or charged? And in the end, the choice by the widest margin, by a large margin, was circumstantial evidence doesn't equal solid evidence. And that's true. Because I'm not saying that some real evidence can't still be found, but right now it does seem like a lot of it is circumstantial evidence. It does, but I still stand by the idea that I wrote in the private blog at Patreon. We're going to be talking about Patreon tonight. That my guess also behind the scenes that there is a DA who's a little wimpy that doesn't want to do anything because there's no body. I really believe that. I believe that as well. But that was the winning choice. Circumstantial evidence doesn't equal real evidence. And it was by a pretty decent margin in the discussion group. And I know somebody, I try to avoid allowing people to just like write in their own choice because I'm really trying, I don't want people to have an out on things like that. You know, somebody wanted to pick, you know, all of the above. Well, I'm really looking for I'm really looking for you to think about it and really, really run through your mind what is the best choice. There is no correct answer. There's no correct answer. I'm just trying to make you think with these polls. They're supposed to be fun because you could comment on down below, but they are a way to try to get you to think about not just that particular case, but cases in general. In this case, in this circumstance, where you have a guy who seems to be an obvious suspect, but he's still walking around free. And of course, we can relate that to a lot of other cases that Unfound has covered. So I'm trying to make you think when I do these polls. They're supposed to be fun, but I'd like you to think about it, and say, well, that's tough. And I want them to be kind of difficult, frankly. Lou, what's going on? Deb, LG Rebel 4. So you're an LG person too, Michelle. Cool. That's cool. That's good. Jerry, what's going on? Nobody, no real evidence? Well, maybe. Lou is asking what happened to the black bag the kids found. Lou, I have to tell you, I don't know. I'm going to be very, very honest with you, even though we talked about it. But we talked about it, if you will remember, under the umbrella of these are the kind of rumors that pop up. It's just an example because Betty had heard many rumors. That's just one of them. Lou, I'm going to be very honest with you. I'm not sure that ever happened. I don't know. I'm not sure what to make of it. I'm not sure that it happened or not. And being that Betty didn't see anything or nobody else in her family saw anything, I don't know what to make of it. Lou, if you don't know, and for the rest of you, I behind the scenes hear a lot of crazy stories. I hear a lot of crazy stories that could be possibly believable. But once in a while, we do jump into some of those rumors depending on the case. Depends on what the rumor is, depends what the case is. It just depends. But, Lou, the reason I dismiss that story is because it's just a little too perfect. It's a little too quaint. And that's why. I'm not sure it ever happened. That's just, my point of view. Cherie says the private blog at Patreon really makes you see things from a different point of view. It definitely brought up things I never thought about. That's what I try to do. We're going to be talking about Patreon here in a moment. Angie, what's going on? Cherie says, Jerry listened to the No Body episode. Super insightful. Yep. Okay. Michelle says, I'm an LG personnel. That's cool. Well, here's the first part of big news that I'm going to be talking about tonight. Starting in January of 2019, this live show is going to be moving to YouTube. Nothing about the show is going to change. All right, it's going to still be on Wednesday nights. It's still going to be at 9 p.m. Eastern. Everything is going to stay the same, except, once again, it's going to be on the Unfound podcast page, of course, where there are already videos there, and that's where the live video is going to be. I'm doing this for a couple reasons. One, I'm starting to realize that a lot of listeners aren't on Facebook. Okay, so they do not have access to this video on. A lot of people just don't have Facebook accounts for whatever reasons, and that's perfectly fine. Whereas everybody goes to YouTube, and you can go and watch videos on YouTube without having an account. You don't have to sign up. You don't have to pay anything. You don't have to give up your password and everything else. You can just go to YouTube and just go through there and pretty much watch whatever you want. Of course, they have like that, Red Tube where you have to pay. But most videos on YouTube are free. All right? That's one of the reasons. The second reason is that these videos, they end up on YouTube anyway. Okay? That's the other reason. Okay? Thirdly, is that this also has to do with Facebook, is that I think we all realize that Facebook, if you are on Facebook, it only covers a segment of the population. Okay? It's a well-known fact that people like under the age of 30, not a lot of them go to Facebook. Why? Because their parents are on Facebook. And I'm going to be trying to get a larger audience for this live show on Wednesday nights by going to YouTube. We're going to work it all out beforehand. You can kind of forget about it for now, because from here to the end of the year, we're going to be right where we are sitting here right now. I anticipate the same kind of quality, the same length, the ability for people to chime in and comment and everything else. I believe that. But I'm just trying to consolidate some things, because, you know, I do this on the Unfound podcast page, but as you know, I spend way more time in the group. Well, I can't do the video in the group because it's private. And I spend a lot of time on YouTube, you know, uploading videos and everything else. It's just a way to try to consolidate things just a little bit more. And frankly, just to be honest, going on YouTube is going to allow me to monetize these videos as well. All right, on top of everything else. And I'm going to take the lead from some other live shows, although not in the true crime genre, mainly from the disc golf community. They do a lot of live videos on there for different podcasts and shows on there. And I'm kind of taking their lead because that's what they do. And I think I understand that community very well. If they, you know, they'd be on Facebook if that was better for them, but they're not. They do their videos on YouTube. And YouTube is a video platform. So that's where the live show is going to be starting the first Wednesday of 2019. Michelle says some folks don't like book face. That's what my brother-in-law calls it. That's funny. Lou says I like YouTube Live better. Awesome. Okay, and see, and I think that I just think it's, you know, because to this day there are still people who've been listening to Unfound for a long time. They're in the group, and somehow they still can't find the video when we do these live videos. Thereafter, I was looking all over for it. I couldn't find it. That's because Facebook is not a video platform. Video is just a part of so many other things that are on here, whereas YouTube is nothing but video. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, once again, starting about 2 months from now, beginning of 2019, and I'm going to be having some test runs and things. So I'm sure all of you maybe want to be involved in that when they happen as well, just to see how the test runs go before 2019 gets here. Shelly, what's going on? Speaking of which, let's do some questions. Got some good questions tonight. And I'm going to start here. This is a good question by Michelle says, did you say we need to go to YouTube or to Unfound to tune in? It's good. Eventually the show, this live show that you're watching right now will be a live show on YouTube instead of on Facebook. The podcast is not changing at all. Just this show on Wednesday nights. Shaney, what's going on? Cherie says we'll be wherever you are, Ed. Oh, is that so, Cherie? Okay, so it seems like the YouTube thing is going over fairly well, and I'll surely remind you, and we'll be having some more discussions about it before we get to 2019. Janet asked, what makes people say they're guilty when they aren't? And I think this has to do with a lot of cases. I think this even happened in the John Benet Ramsey case, where that guy claimed that he's the one that killed her, and then of course it turned out that he didn't. That's the one that first comes to mind. And then I suppose also we could talk about there's prisoners, criminals who are in prison who say they know something about a disappearance and then it doesn't turn out to be true. Janet, I think it does really fall into two categories. Certain people just aren't completely there. I think it's they want the attention, or there's some sort of guilty conscience going on about their life. I think that's one group. I'm not a psychiatrist, okay? Just a perception of mine as your average adult. That they fall into two categories. Those people who are just a little off and have some guilt, or they hallucinate or something. They're those people. And then you have the prisoners who say they've done things. Well, they do that because it gets them out of their cell for a day. They may get a nice meal out of it. They love causing the police to go on wild goose chases. It's for all those reasons. Okay, I have to tell you, once again, I'm probably in the minority when it comes to this, but pretty much when some prisoner after years says, oh, I think I heard something about that disappearance and I want to talk to somebody, I automatically dismiss it. I know the police have to do something. I'm not criticizing the police for going there and talking to the person. But me as a reporter, as a researcher, investigator, privately, I pretty much dismiss it. And I think they do it just to get a rise out of people and everything else. And they hate the police. So what better way to do that than have, detectives running all over the countryside looking for something. So Janet, I think you can break that down into two groups. Stephanie, what's going on? Jerry asks, have you ever considered doing a side project with a podcast devoted to a specific case? Jerry, thank you for typing that again because I missed it before. No, I don't have the time, Jerry. I just don't have the time. Great idea. I think that some of these, like I guess Up and Vanished with the first case that they did, of course, because I can't think of it off the top of my head, I think that's fine. That's really not what I do, and I surely do not have any time to do something like that. Although I will tell you that, there are several cases that Unfound is covered where I would like to do that, but I don't ever see it happen because I just don't have the time. Jerry says, Janet has been watching Making a Murderer. Yeah. Okay. That's where that question comes from, Janet. I didn't know that. I don't have to, you asked me about doing a different type of podcast. I don't even have time to watch some of these things. I'm just a busy guy. Yes, I have that. Katrina, I have Chris Watts in my notes of talking. I don't know if we're going to get to it tonight. The time is moving fast. What did Chris say that was a good... Okay. Another question. So there's your answer for that, Janet. I think it's a variety of things going on. Some of which I think I understand, and some of which I know I don't understand. Lydia asked me, how do I keep timelines organized? How do I keep, I guess, overall, these interviews that I do, how do I keep it all organized? Because in some cases, they can get very complex. Here's what I do. Here's the process. When I talk to a future guest for the first time, I get permission to record the phone call. Okay? And so they, of course, give permission. And then we talk for a couple hours. And then afterwards, I will re-listen to the phone call. This is why I don't have any time to start. One of the reasons I don't have time to do another podcast, because then I re-listen to the entire conversation and I take down the notes. All right, I'm listening. I'm taking down things that pop up, everything else. I'm also thinking about new questions, clarifications that I could ask them for the next time that I talk to them. Okay? So if I have a 2-hour conversation, well, then it's another 2 hours to listen to the phone call again. And sometimes I stop to type things out and then continue. So it's usually going to be longer than 2 hours. So that at that point, I start getting things a little bit organized. I can look at my screen and say, well, this is how we're going to do things. And I need to ask her or him about this and about that to make sure I understand what they were trying to say. Because I often miss things during that initial conversation. And then we have another conversation to clear anything up that I think is a little nebulous or cloudy, I don't understand it and everything. And then it's from that I put together an interview outline that I end up sending to the guest. a few days before we conduct the interview. So they can print it out. They know what order everything is going to go in. And of course, and they can write down notes or whatever they want to do. And then I have my copy on my screen. So I'm looking at my computer as I am conducting the interviews that all of you eventually hear. And I just scroll down and we just hit item by item by item. And probably the most difficult part is the timeline part of it. You know, because in most of these cases, these people were not around when the person disappeared. They weren't the last person to see him. So a lot of what they are saying during an interview is something somebody else told them. And that's why I always ask, hear me ask, when did you find out your daughter was missing? When did you find out something was wrong, something wasn't right? And that is the reason I do that, is to make sure all of you understand that if they're telling the story, a lot of this information they're going over, they found out afterwards. They found out a week later or a year later or 10 years later. They weren't there, of course, when the disappearance happened. That's how I try to keep it all organized. I think I do a pretty good job. Some cases are more complicated than others. I think that I've gotten better at it over 100+ cases, because, you know, the way I look at it is, you know, we have to get this right the first time. You know, for me, I have the advantage of listening to their phone call and going over it and everything else. Well, you know, I'm hoping that when you listen to it, that you catch it the first time. I know sometimes that's not possible given what's going on in your life. A lot of you listen when you're on the treadmill at the gym. A lot of you listen when you're at work. A lot of you listen when you're in the car and you're worrying about making sure you follow all traffic laws. So I understand you're going to miss things. But I try to do it so if you listen to it just alone at home, nothing else going on, that you can follow it the first time. That's what I'm working toward. But Lydia, that's how it gets done. But it really depends on me really understanding what happened. And sometimes that takes time. It takes time. You know, there are some of these cases are very straightforward. And then some of them not so straightforward. Just depends. Okay. There's Stacy. What's going on? So I hope that answers your question, Lydia, about how that all comes together. There's things that, you know, I don't know if it's obvious during when you're listening to an interview that it's scripted out like that. I want my guests to realize that I'm not trying to catch them in anything. That's not the kind of reporting that I do. This isn't some, you know, speaking of politics, this isn't where I'm sitting down with a politician and trying to catch him, you know, talking out both sides of his mouth. That's not what I do. My job is to make sure the public understands what happened. And a lot of these guests, although they might have been, you know, talked about it, you know, to a lot of different people over the years or whatever, I think that the way we do things even makes it easier for them. And I try to make everything as easy for my guests as possible. And Penny, thank you. Let's take another question, and then I'm going to start talking about Patreon a little bit. Shaney asks me, how do I choose who to interview? Do I choose not to do an interview if I don't believe the person? Let's take the second question first. Do I choose not to do an interview if I don't believe the person? The answer is absolutely 100% yes. I can't have people on the program who I don't trust. Okay? And unfortunately, sometimes that could be parents of missing people. I'm not saying they are liars. Okay? I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that sometimes they believe people, and it's obvious to me that the person is not trustworthy. They've gotten they've gotten quite a bit of their information from somebody about a disappearance. And the more they tell me about that person, the more I suspect that person isn't telling the truth. Well, that doesn't help anybody if we do an interview and that mother or father is talking to me, and they are relaying information from somebody who isn't reliable. Okay, that doesn't help anybody. I also know sometimes that people feel like they need to exaggerate, because in this era where, you know, it seems like sensationalism is such a part of true crime, I think many families feel, well, we have to really build this thing up. You know, we really have to really engage, you know, get this element involved and, you know, really make this a real story. So Disappeared or whoever else, and they may start exaggerating. I know that happens, and I understand why they do it. Okay? I'm not necessarily criticizing them. I know why they do it. It's not a factor of them. It's a factor of too many people with programs, TV shows, or podcasts relying on those sensational elements because it's an easier way to market an episode. You know that's not what I do. Okay? You know that. And so sometimes they feel like they need to stick to those exaggerations, and I can't do it. I'm just not going to do it. You know, but I want you to know that I never completely ban any family or anybody from the program. If I'm talking to them, and sometimes it's just not going to work, I never completely ban anybody like that. I'm always open to talking to them again. But I'm very honest with them, and sometimes they figure it out themselves, that I don't even have to say anything, that, you know, we just can't do this right now. Okay. So how do I choose not to do an interview if I don't believe the person? Yes, that's true. Okay. Now, to answer Shani, the first part of the question, how do I choose who to interview? Really, I think the families themselves do that. I think when myself or Emily or Cherie, who has brought some cases to Unfound, and other people, it's just who we can get in contact with. And hopefully it is somebody who really knows the details of the case. And if that person does it, they usually know somebody who does. You know, just for example, today I talked to the mother of a young woman who disappeared in Florida like 25 years ago. And she and the father of the young woman aren't together anymore. And she just told me about halfway through the conversation, you know, I'm telling you all this, but probably the better person to talk to is my ex-husband. He really worked more. His memory is better and everything else. They're not married anymore, but she trusts him. They have a good relationship, I guess. He's just as concerned about finding his daughter as she is. So she said, here's his phone number. You should talk to him. Great. Great. Sometimes these families sort these things out for themselves. And that's why I think that there's such a wide array of different guests on Unfound. Yes, probably mothers probably are the most common, but you get several brothers and sisters, and you get children. And we even had a couple weeks ago, you know, de facto mother-in-law. You never know. It just depends on who knows what and who feels comfortable talking about it, and, you know, a lot of different things. So, Shani, I hope that answers your question. Katrina says, what gets me are the families of the missing that don't want to be interviewed. Katrina, Emily probably could write an entire encyclopedia about that topic. She and I talk about that often in private, and it happens often. You don't know how many times we contact people and people don't get back to us. You know, and I would understand that at the beginning when Unfound was new, but now over 2 years in, it has a very good reputation. I think I have a good reputation. I think Emily has a very good reputation. Anybody can go and listen to any of the episodes to know that we do things the right way, and still we get don't get responses. You know, I don't know. But once again, even that person I was talking to today, that was like 2 months ago or even more, that Emily sent something to the person, and they just get back to you 2 months later. So you never know. Just never know. And as I tell people, I'm still working on a case, trying to get a person on Unfound, a woman that I talked to 2 years ago in much detail about a disappearance. She sent me pictures and all sorts of things. And I think she's been through some stuff over the last 2 years, but she knows that she is always welcome on the program. We just haven't been able to get together on it. And I would love to cover the case because I think it's one that can be solved. And of course, I think they all should be solved, but some are probably going to be easier than others. This is one where there's a fair amount of evidence, just haven't been able to do it. All right, just haven't. Shani, to answer your question, you're welcome. Thank you. Okay, great. Kelly, what's going on? All right, let's talk about Patreon. Like YouTube, I talk about Patreon, and I've been told probably that I don't talk about it enough. I have to be honest with you. It is not easy for me to ask people for money. Okay, I want to set that on the record. And I think that would go for any podcast host or any type of person who has a Patreon account and everything else. But it has come to my attention, and I did not even realize this to within maybe the last week, that, of course, Unfound is a fairly popular podcast. It is not as popular as Sword and Scale. It's not as popular as Generation Y. It's not as popular as, of course, Into the Dark or whatever that is, or Serial. It's not, but it's very popular. And I think that shows in the amount of we've been able to move cases forward. I think that proves that. And I think that we've done a great job. But what I just became recently is that I realized how few Patreon supporters, patrons, Unfound has to many other podcasts that are around the same size. And so we're going to have a Patreon push, and it is not going to be based on dollar amounts. Okay? It's not. But I will tell you right now, I'll just be honest with all of you, and you're hearing this first. This is something that myself and my business manager just talked about this past weekend. And if you want to know who the business manager is, she is in here right now watching, as she usually is. That we are going to make a push by the end of the year. Right now, here's what it is, because I'm going to be totally upfront with you. Right now, Unfound has 71 Patreon supporters, and that is a total of about $350. Okay? I would say that your average podcast that is about the same size, has the amount of same downloads as Unfound, is probably double that. Now, I think that in talking to my business manager, is that one of the reasons is that there might be this perception, well, he does this as his job, and he works with, of course, the Tribune Review, and I, of course, do get paid and everything else, but it may be this perception, well, I live in Madeira Beach and everything else, and I can tell you, I'm a man of small means, okay? But the reason I'm also doing this is that I think that Unfound has, kind of breached the border of just being a podcast. Okay. I think, and I know some of the former guests, I know Joyce is in here, they will tell you that I am more than just a reporter to them. Okay. I think that I get to know my guests very well. They tell me a lot of things that would never end up in an episode about family things and stuff behind the scenes. I think that my former guests know that I pick up the phone anytime they call. I return every text. They call me. And of course they don't get charged. I never charge any. I've been actually sent money by former guests. I immediately have sent that money to like Mary Lau's nonprofit organization. I don't take any of it. None of it. But I've become a confidant to them, a little bit of a psychologist sometimes. I am a researcher, an investigator for them. I've really breached it, and I want that to continue into 2019. As you can imagine, that takes up a lot of time, and I want to, more than anything, I think that the guests figure out that I'm a guy that they can trust. Okay. And I am a good guy. I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back. I'm the guy that in college, I didn't drink. I was the designated driver for all my friends. That's who I was. You can contact any of them on my friends list who were with me in college. They'll tell you that. That's just the kind of person that I am. And so I want to make sure that that continues in 2019. And I think one of those ways is to boost the Patreon support. I'm not asking for $20 a month from each person. $2 a month. That's all I ask. $2 a month from each person. I want to see if we can double that, double the Patreon support. So let's say to 150 people, Patreon supporters by the end of the year. So that's like 50 some days. Okay. Now, the way I look at that is if you are watching this and you are a Patreon supporter, all you have to do is find one person to get to sign up for $2 a month. That's it. I know that there are some people in here who are contributing $20 a month. And I'd like to think that they've been rewarded with books and shirts and my deep, 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 deep thanks. Okay. But I know a lot of people cannot afford that at $20 a month, especially for a program that you get for free anyway. But in being a Patreon supporter, as I have brought up before, what do you get just for signing up for $2 a month? A blog that is not some chintzy blog. I write, the goal is always to do 1,000 words, but I usually do it's a 2,000 word blog that I write every week about the case that week. And it's much more in depth. And really what it is, if you were to see all of it, it's really a study guide, a class on missing persons, about theory, about how I look at certain facts and how you extrapolate them to other cases, because I want to be a teacher. I just don't want to be a reporter, a podcaster. I would like to, and I hope that when you listen to Unfound, that you are getting educated about missing persons cases in general, not just about that case, or Peggy McGuire, Alyssa Turney, etc., but about missing persons in general. I hope that I am raising the awareness of what goes on, because as you know now, there are a lot of misconceptions. There are. And what I do in that private blog is I write down what can be learned from that case. And usually the blog is over 2,000 words. And if you want to know when I do that on Friday mornings before the episode comes out. That's the first thing I do on every Friday morning, is that I get up and I write that blog and I just sit there till it's done. And it could sometimes take me 4 or 5 hours to write it, depending. But I think it's important, and that's why I do it. You get that and a free ebook for $2 a month. $2 a month. We figured it out. What is it? 6.66 cents per day. I think that's a pretty good deal. Now, you have to also keep in something else in mind. And I thank you for all the, compliments. Thank you. Thank you. So you should also keep this in mind. And as I was going through, because you can go to Patreon, and I think just for anybody, you can go in there and see how many Patreon supporters other programs have. You can see them. All right. It's not secret. Some, withheld how much money they're making, but you can see how many supporters, and you'll see that I'm telling the truth. You will see that. And it was a little startling to me, given that, just as an example, we have 3,500 members, in a private discussion group. Those aren't likes, which anybody can hit the button. Those are people who are wanting to get into the group. I have 3,500 members there. If every one of them was a Patreon member, $2 a month, well, we can all add that up. I don't even want that much money. I would never expect to make that much money doing this and get that money, because that money, as I've told you, from Patreon and everything else, PayPal, the shirt, it all goes into book, shirts, and other things for the guests. And frankly, it also pays for my time that I spend with them afterwards. And I've been doing that since the beginning. Because a lot of them need somebody they can trust. Because, as you know, cops don't call them back. Psychics coming after them. I mean, you don't know how many people so far I've talked out of scams. They come to me, this person's coming to me and saying this, it's a scam. I just had that happen 5 days ago from a mother who was on the program over a year ago. Just within the last week that happened. And I told her, you can't be a part of that. And I talked to her for like an hour because of it. So it's not like I'm a reporter and I just move on. I look at every one of these missing persons' faces every day. And that's where the Patreon money goes. It goes to support them. It's not so I can have a new car, anything else. I'm perfectly happy with all the material things I have in my life. I live very, very simply, and I've always been that way. So what I'm asking is that for any of you who are Patreon supporters, if you can find one, I'm asking for you to find one person to sign up for $2 a month, 6.66 cents a day. And I would like to get to 150 patrons by the end of this year. Okay, I think that that's a good goal for the rest of this year. Okay, I'm not going to get crazy. I'm not going to ask for $5 or $15 or $20 or $50 or anything else. $2. That's it. And so I'm going to be talking about this from now to the end of the year. And I'm probably going to do a video on how to sign up at Patreon. I think it's fairly straightforward, but I know it can be confusing to people, and I get that. So I'll probably do a video on that. And I'm going to make it as easy as possible to do that. Because I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it. And what I was going to say is you have to keep in mind something else. For a lot of those podcasts on there, if you sign up for $2 a month, they don't give you anything. In fact, some of them you have to get into $5. They don't even have like a $2 level. You have to start at $5. And some of, if they do have a $2 level, you don't get anything. You don't get anything. Whereas with $2, you get a free ebook, whichever of the first 4 you want. And yes, I'm working on volume 5. You get that and access to the blog. And you'll also know that your $2 a month is going basically toward the former guests of Unfound. That's where it's going. That is where it's going, because they continue to be a resource. I continue to be a resource for them, and they want me to be a resource for them. And I think that Joyce Rivatuzo and Cindy McDaniels, all these people, Lisa Kassoon, Mary Lau, all these people who I talk to once in a while, they love bouncing ideas off me. And I think that if some of them are here, and of course most of them aren't here, they would tell you that $2 a month to help this program out is definitely worth it for their sake. So there you go. That's my pitch. And once again, I was a horrible car salesman. Horrible car salesman way back in the 1990s. Because I do have a problem asking for money from people. I'm kind of the strong silent type. I have a stiff upper lip and everything else. But now that I see what these other podcasts are doing, I'm like, well, and I know that they don't do what I do, behind the scenes. I know they don't. They run fine shows. They can do their shows however they want. I know they don't do behind the scenes what I do for my guests, because a lot of them don't have any guests because they don't do interviews. But I think you know what I'm saying. So there you go. That's my pitch. There is no Shani. There is no fee if you don't donate. Joyce, former guest of Unfound. You are a marvelous and honest person. Joyce Rivatuza, former guest. Lou says, I will sign up, and I just shared your podcast. Thank you. And Emily is saying, thanks, Michelle. Just to let everyone know, because I've been asked how much I make volunteering my time, contacting people, and doing research on cases. I'm a correctional officer, and I make $0 helping Edward on Unfound. That's true. Sheree, yeah, yes, Shaney, please. Um, just some of the other comments that I'm reading here. Unfound is unique. Why isn't this going down? This is another reason that I'm glad we're going to be going to YouTube. Sometimes this is hard to work. Lou, no audiobooks at this time, Lou. Unfortunately not. If essentially a podcast is an audiobook, so there's that. But no audiobooks. And so I'm going to be talking about this group, and I've talked about that enough. I don't generally like talking about money this much, but it's going to be a focus from now to the end of the year. Okay, so there you go. Let's move on to this week's case. I just don't think that I'm going to get to the news tonight, unfortunately, although there have been some good things. But questions and topics about Unfound are most important. So this Friday is the disappearance of Janson Brewer and Daniel Braden. They disappeared from St. Joseph's, Tennessee on August 19th, 2016. Yes, we are doing a disappearance where two men disappeared. It's not one person, two people. Once again, Janson Brewer and Daniel Braden. The title of the episode is Also Known As. So we are going to be exploring the theme of names again this week. Last week, of course, we analyzed whether the last name of Peggy's, the father of her son, name had anything to do. Is he getting away with something because of his last name and his family being in that county and the county being named after his family? We explored that. It seems to me some people thought that might be the case and some didn't. Well, we are going to the absolute other extreme this week, coincidentally, but it works. It's the theme of names again, but it's on the opposite end because in this case, you are going to be asked, if Daniel Braden using an alias is a factor in this disappearance. All right, so before a person with a real name may be getting away, let's just say it with murder, with Peggy McGuire's case, this week is the reason this case hasn't been solved yet because Daniel Braden, at the time of his disappearance, was using an alias. And it became obvious afterwards that neither Janson Brewer or some of these other guys who knew Daniel knew his real name. But Daniel is also disappearing. And the other big deal about this episode is I think this is the first episode in Unfound's existence where one of the people we are looking for could actually be responsible for the disappearance of the other person. In that Janson Brewer might be missing because he was frankly murdered by Daniel Braden, and now Daniel Braden is on the run. This is the first of this kind. I've been wanting to do one of these. What's going on, Jeremiah? I've been wanting to do one of these cases for a while where somebody like that disappears, somebody who's on the lam, and see if we can track this person down. Well, there you go. There you go. Once again, this happened in St. Joseph's, Tennessee in August 19th, 2016. The guest for this episode is going to be Janson's mother, Laura Jenkins. She is in the podcast discussion group if you'd like to talk to her. But I was very fortunate to track down people who knew Daniel Braden as well, too. I got to talk to two people who knew him well that can be trusted. And they are not going to be on the program, but I'm going to relate to you what they had to say about him after my interview with Laura. Okay? So it's, once again, a very unique case. You know that we don't do too many disappearances where multiple people, of course, with the McDaniel sisters. We had David Medott and his two buddies who disappeared out in the Gulf of Mexico back in the 1990s. I guess you could say we did Flight 370, which was hundreds of people disappearing. We did Laura Bible and Ashley Freeman. We are going to add to that list this Friday. But this is the first case where one of the people we are looking for might actually be the criminal in the disappearance. So very interesting. Very There you go. And Emily says, "Oh, I really like Janson's mom. Laura's great. She's great. She got this beautiful Tennessee Southern accent, but she came through clear. You're going to perfectly understand her beautiful accent." And Kelly, yes, I can link you to Patreon after the live discussion. I will do that. I will do that in the group. So that is going to be the case for this Friday. And it's a unique one, as I think all of them are in their own way. But as you know, we don't do too many multiple person disappearances. So in this week, we may be looking for a killer, although it's very possible that Daniel met the same fate as Janson. That will be up for you, the listeners, to decide. We've gone over, let me just touch upon a couple news items that have come up. The update on Jamie Kloss, of course, this is the girl who is still missing after her parents were murdered in their house. She's still not found. To my knowledge, I don't know any more than any of you do, that there doesn't seem to be any leads, at least that the police are letting anybody know. So it's still a big mystery, and she has not been found. The Muslim sisters that we talked about maybe last week or the last week before that, it has been determined that they were alive when they went into the water in New York City, and they also figured out that they were just running up credit cards like they were going out of style. It seems pretty clear to me that these were suicides because they didn't want to go back to Saudi Arabia. It seems pretty clear to me. I'm open-minded at this point, but being that they seem to be having their big last fling in New York City tells me something. And then I felt I needed to talk about this real quick because I hear this a lot from guests. It's the disappearance of Charleston Goodman in North Carolina. That he was fed to hogs, and the police are looking, and this is disappearance I think happened at the beginning of this year. I cannot tell you how many my guests tell me that. That's a rumor that they hear. I usually completely dismiss those types of things. In fact, I would say that if I were to take seriously every rumor that I heard like that, it would seem to me that every hog farmer in the United States would have to be a partner in a murder. That's how much I've heard it over the last 2 years. I think that that is something that was generated in Hollywood that has now become into the lexicon of missing persons cases, because I think it was the movie Hannibal. It was the movie after Silence of the Lambs where that guy plans to feed Hannibal Lecter to the hogs, and of course it backfires on him. I hope I'm not ruining that movie for anybody. But I think that's where that all got started, and now it's become a great story to tell in missing persons cases. Generally, I dismiss it pretty much, okay? Because I hear it so much that there can't be that many missing people being fed to hogs. I thought that I needed to talk about that. And I'm not sure if that's ever been a topic in the Patreon blog. I don't know. But you will find out if you sign up for $2 a month. So that's it. That's all I got for tonight. I thank you all for tuning in. You know all about the books and shirts. I'm wearing, of course, an Unfound shirt. Cards. Of course, Patreon. I've already mentioned that. PayPal. The sales of the ebooks on Amazon are going really well, but I'm not getting many reviews. So I'm still wondering what's going on there. But that's it. I hope you had a good time tonight. I did, as always. And I will see you next Wednesday. Of course, you will hear me on Friday when I cover the disappearances of Janson Brewer and Daniel Braden from St. Joseph's, Tennessee in August of 2016. And the title of that episode is going to be also known as. Good night, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm going to be posting some links and some things in the group regarding Patreon, and you'll hear about that on Friday. Thank you all for making me a part of your Wednesday night. I always enjoy this favorite time of my week. Thank you so much. Night.